Bienvenidos, Ushamdeed, and welcome to this Hut 8 Consulting Techtorial on the Enterprise Networking, Security, and Automation CCNA version 7 curriculum. This packet tracer activity is activity 10.1.5, where we're going to use the Cisco Discovery Protocol in order to map a network. Now, CDP is a Cisco proprietary protocol. And so that's one of the first things that we're going to be talking about, is that this does not work like you'll see it work in this video. It's not going to work like this between devices that are not Cisco devices. And so let's dive in and take a look at the topology that we're going to be dealing with here. And you can see it's very straightforward. We've got our admin PC. We have switch 1, and that's a switch that we will not be able to get logged onto. And then we have the edge 1 router. Now, there are a lot of things I like about this activity, one of which is how do we deal with CDP when we may have an external facing communication, and you can see the serial connection that we have here that would go out over some kind of a WAN connection to the branch routers that are over here, this remote branch over here. And so let's go ahead and take a look. You can see that we've got a username and password here, and then we've also got a username and password for the branch network. And let's dive in. We're also going to take a look at real Cisco devices as well as a Wireshark dump to see exactly what those messages look like that are being sent. Remember, CDP messages are actively being sent out, and there is an address that's being used in the Ethernet header when those addresses are sent out, and it's 0100.0 Charlie 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 and then 4 C, and it's the letter C. And so we'll take a look at that when we dive in to the header. So these messages are actively being sent out. So what are we going to do here? So use SSH to remotely access network devices. In part 1, we're going to go to the admin PC right here, which we already have up. And let's open the admin PC up a little bit here. And let's give ourselves some space to work with. We're going to come to the command prompt. Now, from the command prompt here, we're going to type in SSH. Now, this is, I teach the CCNA security course, and this causes so much confusion, specifically that -L, right? It's -L as in Larry. It is not the number 1. And so learners new to Cisco technologies see that and they type SSH, and here's typically what they do. They'll type SSH-1. You can see how close that looks to that, right? So very hard to tell. And if I was to say 192.168.1.1, you get this invalid command, and then learners immediately think that they're doing something wrong. And I've actually had a few learners who have spent about 30 to 40 minutes trying to figure out what they're doing wrong before contacting me. Remember, it's SSH-L admin01 192.168.1.1, and we get the password prompt. And again, I should probably scroll back up just a little bit there. So the password is going to be admin01, and then they've got a crazy S3CRE7PA55. So pretty crazy password there that we're going to have to enter in. And you can see we're now logged on to the Edge 1 router. And it says, notice that you're placed directly into privilege exec mode. That's because admin01 user account has a privilege level set to 15. Right? Now you may or may not want to do that. And you can see, excuse me, if we go down to the username section, you can see the privilege level is set to 15. All right, so we're on the Edge router. What do we have next? It wants us to type in the show IP interface brief. So show IP interface brief. And so there's a list of the interfaces with the IP addresses. You can see the serial 000 interface is definitely going to be our WAN facing interface. And gig 00 is going to be that interface right there on the inside of this edge network and of our sort of headquarters network here, if you will. All right. And then let's say show interfaces. And you can see we've got the interface information here. Again, tons of information about the different interfaces there. All right, let's see. And then it says to document the Edge 1 router's physical interfaces IP addresses and subnet masks in the addressing table. So if you were filling this out, right, you would go ahead and add in for serial 000, and let me go ahead and rerun this here, show IP interface brief. You could add in the interface for serial 000. You'll notice here that they have, and I believe this may be a typo of some kind, unless this is what they're saying here is this is the interface over on the remote branch, but it makes it look like it's part of Edge 1. But you can clearly see here that on Edge 1, the only 209.165.200 address is on serial 000, not on serial 001. So again, we may be going over to the remote branch and we'll have to pick that information up. And you can actually see right there. So fortuitous, I hadn't read ahead here yet, but you can see that that is going to be the address that we try to use to get onto the branch, remote branch devices over there. And so that's going to be the next thing that it's going to have us do. And we're going to do that right here off of Edge 1. So I'm going to say SSH -L, and we're going to be using branch admin is the username, and then 209.165.200.10. And we have to put a password in, and you can count on it being that same password there, the capital S3 CRE 7 capital PA 55, and take a look at that. We're now on the branch edge router, and you can see the branch edge router has sort of an internal local LAN interface possibly that it's using here with the 192.168.3, and there is the WAN facing interface, and clearly that is what we're seeing up here in the addressing table. So initially they kind of make it appear as if maybe these three interfaces belong to the Edge 1, but clearly if you're filling this addressing table out, you would put branch edge in right there. All right, so let's scoot up just a bit here. So we're going to be doing some things on the branch edge router. Now, this is where I'm going to be moving between this packet tracer activity and some real Cisco 2811 routers. Again, some lower end routers that I have powered on here 24/7, so we could take a look at what CDP looks like in real life as well. So we're going to issue the show IP interface brief, and I'm not going to run the show interfaces command. Or let's go ahead and run it. You can just see we're going to get a lot of output here, right? And we did run the show IP interface brief, which is going to give us a little more valuable information for our purposes. And now what they want us to do is they want us to run that show CDP. And you can see that CDP is not enabled. And this is something to sort of note, right? By default, CDP is going to be on. And there's two ways that we can manipulate CDP. We can manipulate CDP on a per interface level, and we can manipulate CDP on a global level, right? So remember that. And it says right here, you need to turn on CDP, but it's a good idea only to broadcast the CDP information to internal network devices, not to external networks. And so in other words, that serial 001 interface here on the branch edge router, in fact, let me highlight it right here, which is externally facing, that is an interface where we would probably not want to have CDP running. And this is one of the things I love about this activity, because as a network administrator, CDP can be very, very valuable. However, there are a number of security individuals who don't actually understand how we can mitigate and control the exposure with CDP. And so the edict, and they come down and they typically dictate that CDP needs to be turned off globally, that CDP cannot be running on any interface, right? And that, you know, okay, sure, we can turn CDP off. We're losing a lot of visibility as a network administrator. And what if we're using IP phones, right? Because believe it or not, there's two important functions. And just think of it, you can think of it as two roles that CDP plays, right? It's going to provide information to devices. In the case of the Cisco IP phone, right, they use that CDP information, and then it provides information to us, the engineers. And we can control how that information is being broadcast out, right? So if we can control it, just like with OSPF messages, we can passive an interface with OSPF, right? And we can do the same thing on a per interface level with CDP. However, again, in a lot of cases, you'll have security individuals who are just running scripts that don't actually understand how we can control CDP, who will come to you and say, you need to turn CDP off on every interface. And you can see here that it is. If I was to say show run, let's see if we can get this. And there it is right there, right? So in the global configuration on the branch edge router, we have no CDP run, right? So, correction there. In the global config, and I guess let me take a step back here. I want to clarify. So it's in the global config, right? But it's on it's on an interface. When you say I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself here. When you say no CDP run, it's in the global configuration. And that's a command that you issue from the global config prompt, right? So if I was to say config T, here's where I would say no CDP run. And then globally, all interfaces, right, across this router have CDP disabled, right? That's a global command. So let me be clear. No CDP run is a global command. On the per interface level, I can go into an interface and say either no CDP enable, right, on a per interface level, or I could say CDP enable to enable it on an interface. So again, I apologize there. As soon as I said it's in the global config, it dawned on me that, well, if I say no CDP enable on an interface, that shows up in your global config as well. And what I was trying to say is when you say no CDP run, that's a command that's going to show up in the global config that is issued from this global config prompt. So what they want us to do on the branch edge router here is to say configure terminal, which we've already done, and then we're going to say CDP run. Now, as soon as I say CDP run, CDP is running on do show CDP neighbor. You can see that we are running CDP. And so what's the gig 00 connection? Well, it goes out to a device, and you can see here the device ID, the columns are a little skewed. Let me give myself a little bit more room to run here, and hopefully it's going to spread that out. No, it's still going to drop it down a line. I was hoping to get a little better orientation there on the output. So let's talk about these different headers right here, the column header information. So we've got the device ID. Typically that's going to be the host name, right? So branch-firewall is the device on gig 00 that I see. We've got the local interface, right, which we know is my interface. That is the branch edge router's interface. And then we have the hold time. Now, think of the hold time just as a routing protocol like EIGRP or OSPF, where you've got the hellos that are being sent out. And I'll talk about, let's focus on OSPF. Every 10 seconds on a broadcast multi-access segment, OSPF is sending hellos out. Well, CDP does much the same thing, right? It's sending out, and you can think of it as like CDP hellos. So let me step over here to a real set of Cisco routers. We've got a 2811 here, and let me step over to Wireshark, where I'm actively capturing packets that are being sent on this LAN. And so let's stop the capture, and you can see right here. Here is a CDP advertisement. You can see the device IDs, right? We've got router 9, and then we've got router 8. Well, let's take a look at router 8. And so we'll take a look at the Cisco Discovery Protocol. You can see by default, it's going to be version 2. My TTL, the time to live, that is the hold time. And so what does that mean, right? Well, what that means is that as long as I'm receiving CDP packets about this device, which I'm going to receive those packets, I'm going to process them, and then I'm going to discard them, right? I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of the packet. I'm not going to forward the packet on. These are critical points to remember is that with CDP, the receiving device, router or switch or whatever the case may be, is going to receive the CDP packet. It's going to process the CDP packet, and then it's going to just go ahead and get rid of the CDP packet. It does not forward the CDP packet on, right? And the same is true with hellos and OSPF, right? A router receiving an OSPF hello does not then turn around and take some other router's hello message and then fire it out across, 80 other routers that might be out there. No, that's a conversation between those two routers. And again, we'll talk about it in the context of like a point-to-point interface. It's going to be those two routers that are going to get that CDP information about each other, and then they're going to get rid of that. They're just going to drop the packet once they've processed it, and then they're going to hold on to it. And if they don't hear from the other router after 180 seconds, right, or a switch, whatever the device might be, they are going to go ahead and remove the information from when I say show CDP neighbor, they will no longer show up, right? And so this is actively taking place. And so let's look at router 8 and 9, right? These are the two routers that we're capturing. And if I come into privilege exec, if I say, for example, if I was to say show CDP, right? This is going to give me some great information. Packets are sent every 60 seconds. And so it's almost like BGP in a way, right? And BGP a little outside of the CCNA scope, right? But BGP behaves similarly with its keep alives every 60 seconds by default. And then after 180 seconds, if I haven't heard from you, if I haven't received your CDP advertisement after 180 seconds, then, well, I'm removing you from my table. And BGP does the same thing. It's going to remove that neighbor from the neighbor table because 3 minutes have gone by. I haven't heard from you, so you're dead to me, right? There's no easy way to say it. So I could also say show CDP interface. And you can see here that I could type in whatever the interface may be. So here, let's say, I think it's serial 000. We might have some action going on. And let's say show IP interface brief. And actually, we're going to get a ton of information here. So I'll say show CDP interface fast Ethernet 0.10 because I know that's the interface on which I'm listening here. And take a look at the information that you can get right here on a per interface basis, right? So I see that I'm working. It's a sub interface. That's fine. It's going to work. You can see that the line protocol is up. The interface is up. Take a look at this though, right? I'm doing .1Q encapsulation on a sub interface. I also get VLAN information. And this is where the Cisco IP phone conversation becomes important because the IP phone can get the voice VLAN and the data VLAN information. And again, I'm sending CDP packets every 60 seconds, and there's my hold time value again. Now, another command, what about show CDP traffic, right? This is going to give me some statistics. There is a CDP version 1, but again, that's not going to be used by default. You should be using the most recent version, which is going to be CDP version 2, and we can see how many advertisements we've sent out and how many we've received on this router, right? And so those are commands that are going to show me some interesting information. If I go back to the Wireshark packet capture, there it is, version 2. There's my time to live. Look at the device information I can gather up here, right? I can see that based off the device ID, which is the host name, I get the host name information. What about software? Take a look at that. I'm gathering, right, or I should say I'm advertising the software version, right, when I say I'm talking about router 8, you can see here, that's the version of software that I'm running. We get platform information about the device. It's a Cisco 2811. So if I didn't have that in the host name, we would be able to get that information. Addresses. I can get IP address information, right? And again, when I say get, I'm talking about routers that would be receiving this message, would get this information. And this is the information I'm advertising. There's the IP address information, port ID, right? There is the port out which that information is being sent. Capabilities. Here are the capability codes, and we can extend those out and take a look. Router, Yes. IGMP, capable, yes. Switch, yes, right? So these are all of the capabilities that we have. And take a look at the IP prefixes. And again, it's going out a physical interface, which is fast Ethernet 00, but it's attached to multiple, or I should say there are many sub-interfaces on there. VTP domain information, it's a router, we don't have anything there, and then the duplex information, full. And that's the same information. If I was to step back over here on this edge router, let's take a look and see, does Cisco, if I was to say show CDP traffic, doesn't support that command, right? What about show CDP interface? We do support that command. Let's say serial 001, and there's that information right there. What about just show CDP? And you've got it. We still see that the information that we were looking at. But again, let's take a step back. Why I like this activity. In fact, I love this activity because it shows you on an external facing interface, like, let's get into global config here and let's get into global config and let's go into interface serial 001. And I would say no CDP enable, right? So CDP enable, no CDP enable. Those are interface commands. CDP run, no CDP run, those are global configuration commands that affect all of the interfaces on a device. And be prepared for this, what I just mentioned, right? That no CDP enable on an interface at the interface level, and then no CDP run from a global perspective. To be presented with something like that, not only in your testing for certification, but in your testing for a Cisco course similar to this. So we've said no CDP enable. We've disabled CDP on that interface because it's facing non-internal devices. And so something like this right here, again, protects your internal environment, right? Because my thing has always been, if someone can get onto your router that's not supposed to be on your router, you have bigger issues than them being able to type in show CDP neighbor, right? Or show CDP neighbor detail. And so let's take a look at that command now. So let's go ahead and say end, and let's say show CDP neighbors. And you can see, we see that firewall. Is there a neighboring network device? What type of device is it? And again, we were talking about the capabilities for router. We're talking about the platform C1900. Again, they just named it branch firewall, right? Maybe it's running zone-based firewall because it's not a 5508 or 5506. And then we could see the remote port ID, which is gig 00. And so those are that's the information that we're going to be receiving. Now let's go ahead and say show CDP neighbors detail. Now this is going to show us about 10 to 15 lines here. And take a look now about the information. Again, these are the advertisements being sent out by that Cisco C1900 router that's named branch firewall. And we get the IP address of that device. We can see how much time is left in our hold time. But we get all kinds of information. We get all of, again, this information that we saw in the packet capture, right? This is information that you're seeing in that packet capture I showed you earlier when we wanted to take a look and see the different fields that we would get. And there's that software version, right? You get all that software version information. And here's where you're getting that, right? The version, and it prints it out for us. Advertisement version, version 2, duplex full. So again, the packet capture, the packets don't lie, right? The packets don't lie. And so that's our show CDP neighbor detail command. So now that we know the IP address of the neighbor device, connect to it with SSH. And so now off this branch admin device, we're going to say SSH -L branch admin. We're going to get onto that C1900 branch firewall device, 192.168.3.254. And you can see this is where the security team gets very, very nervous because you can map the network out. But again, if someone's able to log on to your devices, my argument is them being able to Oh, sorry, I said 254. I wanted 253. Apologize there. All right, and then the password, I'm going to have to go back up here. I cannot remember that password. All right, so capital S3 CRE7 capital P @55. And here we are on the branch firewall. So I'll come back down here. We just logged onto the branch firewall. What does the command prompt show? Well, it shows the host name, right? And it shows we're in privilege exec mode. And so we can assume and we can confirm that if I log into a device and I go immediately to privilege exec, that the privilege level for that username and account has been set to 15, right? All right. You're remotely connected to the next neighbor. You show CDP neighbors. Let's see what we see here. So we'll say show CDP neighbors. And there we go. And you'll notice that whatever that, we're over here in the quote unquote cloud, but we can see we're connected to a branch switch that's on floor 2, right? So some useful information in the name there. And we see the branch edge router over here, right? So that's where this serial connection comes in. This is the device that we're logged into right now actually, it doesn't appear that way. Branch edge. Oh, I'm sorry. Branch edge is probably, it's edge 1. So branch edge is in this cloud here. And my guess is it's branch edge that is connected over here to edge 1. And so let's see what we've got here. Show CDP neighbors. We can say show CDP neighbor detail, right? And again, we're going to get a lot more information. We can see the switch we're connected to. It's a 2960 running 12.2. And we can see the IP address on that switch, right? You can see all the different capabilities and information to discover other connected neighbor devices. What types of network devices? Record any newly discovered devices, right? So you would put these devices in your addressing table, include their host names, interfaces, and IPs, continuing discovering network devices using SSH and the show CDP command. So then the next device you would want to go to would be, oops, sorry about that. Let's get this back up here. The next device that you would want to go to is probably branch edge. Get the IP SSH over to it. Switch branch floor 2. Get the IP SSH over to it using the SSH information contained above. And again, remember that the security team is going to freak out and they're going to tell you to disable CDP everywhere. However, there is a way to mitigate the exposure with CDP. And that is simply to maybe enable it globally and then go interface to interface, simply saying CDP enable, right? So if you wanted to say no CDP enable on all your interfaces, then you could say CDP enable. Now, something else to take a look at here. Again, we're at 100% on the activity, but there's some more important information to talk about here. And that is if I come back up here, we'll take a look at the Ethernet header, and there is that 0100 0 Charlie, 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 and then 4 Charlie. So this is for CDP, VTP, DTP, PAGP, UDLD, unidirectional link detection, right? So here is the destination address. And so devices that are listening, right, are going to see this information. And like we see here, they're going to take that information, like router 8 making this advertisement, right? Router 9 is listening for that. And that's how router 9 has the CDP information about router 8 and vice versa. All right, well, we've covered quite a bit of information here. We crushed this activity, right? We've got 100% on the activity. We want to go through and continue to practice and map the network out. But CDP is a very, very useful protocol. And actually, one last thing that just dawned on me is we can make changes to those timer values. Right now, my guess is you're probably not going to see this on a Cisco CCNA activity, but you might be wondering, right? So advertise version 2, that's default hold time. So I could change the hold time. If I thought 180 seconds was too long, maybe I change it to 120. If I was to say CDP timer, right, in which the packets are sent, and I want to miss 3 packets, maybe I drop the time to 40 seconds. So say do show CDP traffic. Oh, sorry, not traffic. I wanted show CDP. do show CDP, you can see that I've just changed the CDP packet send time as well as the hold time. So again, you can manipulate these values. Really no reason to come in and manipulate the values, but just know that that's something that you could do. All right, well, we have crushed it here with CDP and learning how to map a network, and not just learning how to map a network, but learning about all of the different commands and information that we can use CDP to gather up about our network. All right, thank you so much for watching. Best of luck to you out there in your studies, and I hope to see you in the next video.